become who we want to be as individuals. And at the end of the day, that's going to help us be a successful offense.
Man-to-man, one-on-one coverage because the safety rolls to Jefferson's side.
Jordan Love hit me up the night of the draft, just congratulating me, letting me know it was time to work. A.J. Dillon was open arms.
Von Rock caught a ball with his thighs. We didn't even talk about that.
It was more of with his ass.
If he throws a good ball, this is a running, catching touchdown untouched.
Like, KP does like these flips after every win, and I'm like just waiting for him to do his flip.
To know that we still love each other, that's what football brings us.
Across the safety's face.
You can tune in anywhere that you guys follow us on social media. Welcome to the Practice Squad Podcast, episode 85. My name is Jon. I'm joined by my co-host Mark. And we got a spicy one today because we're getting into lying season of the draft. The draft is just a couple weeks away at this point, and this is where people, for whatever incentives, want certain people's stock to rise or fall. And so there's a cast of characters here. I mean, Mark? We got about 20 of them that are kind of in this like middle debate. What's their value? Who's their fit? All of that stuff. And I think there's a lot of people going back and forth on what they actually think about a player. And so we are going to be talking about nothing but the hotly contested players in this draft for this episode. Mark and I have watched film on these guys. We've been in the middle of the banter about them for several weeks now. We're familiar with them. We know the pros and cons, and you can figure out kind of which side that you want to sit with some of these players as far as where their actual draft stock is. Mark, I know that you're heated up about this one. It's been a good sports week in general. March Madness wrapping up. How you doing? I like the background, by the way. It looks good.
New backdrop. Yep, new backdrop. Spent a lot of time on it.
Is that all you?
Yeah, this is all me, man. It's all me. You might think that I don't have any artistic abilities, but I do.
It's pretty good.
I can get creative. Well, not only Jon is the creative one here, but yeah, here's the thing with the draft, right? You have guys that are overrated, guys that are underrated, and then guys that are right around spot on, right? And every single year, you have guys that were rated incorrectly coming into the draft. You have the Brock Purdy's of the world, and then you have guys that come in with high expectations and fail, and then you have guys that fit in right where they belong. And every year, people debate this pre-draft. And I'll be honest, Jon, the last couple seasons, we've been pretty good. We've been pretty accurate with how we feel going into the draft. These players are going to pan out. Obviously, we've missed on some. You're never going to be 100%.
I was so wrong about Sam Laporta. I'll just come right out and say that I was so wrong about Sam Laporta.
I was wrong about Will Levis. So it goes, it's you can be wrong. But the reality is we're usually pretty close to being accurate. And we're going to hit you with some of the hottest, most debated players going into this draft, whether they're too hyped or underhyped. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get into what we think. And we'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. Go at it. This is the place to do so.
Yeah, no, we are encouraging healthy debate for this episode. That is to be certain. And we're going to start with somebody who I think is the perfect example of this. Has been QB2 for a year and a half now. Right behind Caleb Williams, this is the other guy that is in this draft that people should be talking about. And now I'm seeing mock drafts where he's falling into the middle of the first round. He's QB3. He's QB4. Just a couple of mock drafts where I'm seeing he's QB5. This guy is Drake Maye. And his measurables are there. He was a much better player when he had a better cast of characters around him last year. He lost a lot of those guys this year, and his production struggled. And that is being counted against him in the situation. And I guess the argument you're trying to make is whether or not that's fair. Mark, what's your first impressions on Drake Maye's draft stock dropping pretty significantly just in this past week? I feel like this kind of hit suddenly. Is it lying season? Somebody likes him a lot and they're just trying to drop his stock, or they're concerned?
It's been progressively happening, Jon, since we got into this draft time of the year. I think early on he was being talked about as the first pick, and then he's a sure second pick behind Caleb. And then all of a sudden, Jane Daniels and JJ are creeping in there and climbing ahead of him, right? And so now you're looking at where, he could be the fourth or fifth quarterback taken. I still think he's the best quarterback, best prospect at that position in this draft, and I still think that he should be the first quarterback taken. The only reason that people wouldn't do it is because of how good Caleb was, and everybody's thinking that he's going to be like the next Patrick Mahomes because the similarities are absolutely there. And you don't want the fear of being wrong is what's going to cause Caleb Williams to 100% be the first pick. And I don't blame guys, because if you miss on Caleb Williams and he ends up being what everyone's saying he's going to be, you're fired.
Right.
But your job is to evaluate as a talent evaluator, as a GM, as an owner, as a coach. Like, your job is to find the right fit for you. And I think Drake Maye is the best prospect at this position in this draft. I think he has been for some time now, better half of 2 years. And yeah, like you said, his team was not as good. His surrounding cast was not as good last year. So his production wasn't the same. That makes sense. I mean, you look at Patrick Mahomes. You take away Tyreek Hill and stuff, he's still winning games, but his production is not nearly the same as it was. You lose a top target, you're going to go down. You lose two of your top targets, you're going to go down. So everything about Drake Maye, I like. His size, he's got incredible arm talent. And the simple comparison I can make, John, and the best debate point I have is he reminds me so much of a combination of Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, two guys that were incredibly underrated for their entire college career, even early in their pro career. And there's a lot of teams that probably wish they drafted Justin Herbert. Right. A lot of guys.
One thing I'm hearing right now as one of these narratives, because I agree, right? Okay, you lose the seat to Caleb, then people start having conversations of, well, Washington, scheme fit, system-wise might be a better fit for Jaden. Okay, Maye's down to QB3. Then McCarthy skyrocketing, and then, Penix. And now we're saying, we've shifted from scheme, fit, Caleb's generational to, well, there's some serious problems that show up on the tape. One of them is footwork, and the other one is forced throws that lead to mistakes. What's your response to both of those?
Every quarterback in this draft has those same mistakes. There's not one quarterback in this draft that's perfect. And I think the one main thing when people debate quarterbacks in the draft every year, we've got 4 or 5 legitimate first-round quarterback prospects, right? How many of those guys are going to succeed in the NFL? I'm going to give you one. One of those 5 will be more than a 6-year starter in the NFL. That's how it is. That's how it is.
Yeah, I was going to say that's history.
And for every Andrew Luck, there's 12 busts.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say bust, I don't mean that you go in and you're as bad as like Zach Wilson. I mean, you go in and you bounce around the league, kind of like what Baker Mayfield did early on, right? Like, bounced around the league, didn't really get a fair shot. That's going to happen, right? But for every one of those guys, there's 10 or 12 guys that are complete misses that end up 2-3 years in and then they're out. And it's not always because of character issues or because they couldn't figure it out. It's sometimes just you don't get put in the right fit. Patrick Mahomes in the wrong situation might never have been what he is. Tom Brady, if he never got his opportunity, we wouldn't even know his name.
Yeah,
so it's all
definitely
about
a tolerance. Yeah, it's a situation. It's a tolerance thing where it's like, that people, I mean, Trevor Lawrence right now, you could say is underperforming for, as an NFL player from what people expected.
And he was a surefire 100% number one pick prospect. And even he is having some question marks. That's right.
And there's a possibility where the Jags don't extend him, don't give him a 5th-year option. He goes somewhere else. He turns into an NFL journeyman, and then his story just kind of fades, with all the others, which happens all the time. Look at Sam Darnold. Look at
Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz. There's so many of these guys that you could talk about. So to say it's crazy, to be like, hey, one of these, 5 first-round quarterbacks are actually going to be, a generational talent. No, if history is any indication, that's exactly what we're going to get is
maybe
5 guys.
Maybe one, maybe none. Like, that's just how that's the reality of the situation. People forget that every year.
Right. And honestly, I think, 3 or 4 of these guys could be NFL starters, but that's going into this draft. And it's more likely than not that both Mark and I are wrong on that. Moving on to another guy here. And I know Mark's fired up about this one, has taken to TikTok and all that with this guy in specific, Cooper DeJean. And I agree with Mark, right? He just had his pro day recently. I don't have his measurables pulled up, but he had a stellar
I'll pull him up.
Mark's got him. Okay. And he's currently, I mean, if you're to go on some mock draft simulators.
Took me 2 seconds.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. So let me just read you these numbers, and I'm not even gonna tell you for sure if this is Cooper DeJean or somebody else, John. Okay, because you wouldn't know the difference, right? This is a player who wasn't able to train for this for 2 months because of an injury, and then once he was finally cleared, went out and participated. Sent a letter to all 32 teams, said I'm ready to go. Come to my pro day. I'm going to show you why you should draft me. 4.43 and a 4.45 in his 240-yard dash attempts, 38.5-inch vertical, 10 feet 4-inch broad jump. Okay. And he weighed in at 202 pounds. All right. And yeah, it is Cooper DeJean. Okay. I was just trying to trick you guys. But if I read those numbers and you didn't know it was Cooper DeJean's numbers coming, you wouldn't guess that. And yeah, he breaks the stereotype of a fast white player, right? Especially at the corner position. And there's people that without even really evaluating this guy, a lot of owners, a lot of the media have already transitioned him to a safety. Could he be a great safety? Absolutely, he could be. He's a freak athlete. John, fun fact about Cooper DeJean. As a high school basketball player, Harrison Barnes, you ever heard the name? Played for North Carolina, played for the Warriors on those championship teams, still plays for the Kings. He has more high school points in the same state that Harrison Barnes played in. He has more high school basketball points, varsity career basketball points.
Dude's an athlete.
He's a freak athlete, dude. He's a freak athlete. And then he goes to Iowa. He's an outstanding punt returner, outstanding kick returner. So he has that thing that edges him above a lot of these other guys that are maybe equal to him in terms of defensive back skills. He's got that as an X factor. And then, dude, he's got great ball skills. He's got great tracking skills. Does the guy get beat? Absolutely. Does every defensive back get beat? Absolutely. Jalen Ramsey gets beat all the time.
Right.
All the time. So this guy can play corner if you need him to play corner. He can play nickel if you need him to play nickel. He could be a specialist if you need him to be a specialist, and he can play safety for sure. But to just move his position to a safety pisses me off. It's like this weird thing that the NFL has and the media has. There hasn't been a white starting corner in our lifetimes, John.
I was going to say it went from a long-running joke to us seeing a prospect, and as on account of his race, we've gone from he's a safety. Because no white guys ever succeeded at the corner position in the past 20 years.
It's fascinating. I mean, he played corner throughout college. This is a guy who covered Marvin Harrison Jr. and covered him decently well. That's a hard ask. No. I just don't understand it, and it really bothers me. And honestly, John, it's no different than all those years where the world, the media painted black quarterbacks as people who couldn't play the quarterback position.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's the same. It's the same thing. Because of the color of their skin. Are we crazy? Like, we're past that. We're past that, and we fight so hard for every other race. This is a rare situation where the white person is the one that's getting discriminated against.
But I mean, you're right. There's
truth.
so many quarterbacks that, I mean, look at the pre-draft narrative around CJ Stroud. I mean, they literally were saying this dude is too stupid to play quarterback.
Yes, it still happens.
Are you kidding?
And it's just ridiculous. I just don't understand how it can. Like, dude, watch the tape. Interview them, watch the tape, interview them in meetings. Like, you're going to find out, like, skin color regardless, background regardless, and then you'll find out.
And then measurables. I mean, again,
dude, Cooper DeJean can't test better than that.
Yeah, 6
you
foot
literally
1,
can't
4,
as a defensive back, bro. He's a freak of nature. He can play any of the. I'm telling you, if he doesn't go in the first round, if he doesn't go in the top 25 picks, I have questions, man. It's bullshit.
Hey, I'd love it if he fell to 29.
Listen, I would too. And guess what? Lions will probably pass on him and take somebody else, and he'll fall into the second round. And then we'll be talking about this 10 years from now. Like, hey, remember when everybody skipped on Cooper DeJean and he ended up playing, 10 years in the NFL, and he's one of the top guys from this draft class? Like, I just don't get it, dude. If he were, let's be honest, if he were black, he's the top corner in this draft. Okay, and almost every media outlet, every prospect, every mock draft. Let's be real, because he has the numbers and he has the film to back it up. And the only thing because you're just not going to draft a safety that high. That's the thing, right? So if you make him a safety now, you're not going to take a safety as high as you're going to take a star corner.
Yeah, I know. I think he's one of the better players in this draft. Absolutely. So, and like Mark said, kicking off this conversation, it has gone, both ways for several years in this draft. So, moving on to another guy, Lad McConkey, and Mark's about to have the absolute opposite narrative.
Absolute opposite take. You would think, based on my Cooper DeJean take, that I'm gonna be like, oh, white receiver, like he's underrated. No. I think Lad McConkey's overrated as shit. All right, I'll be honest.
Okay, why is that? Because I've heard nothing but glowing reviews about Lad by most analysts here.
I mean, I'll be honest, John. He's a good college football player. There's not you can't really single out like a bunch of weaknesses in his film or in his game. But I've seen him getting, projected to go like end of first round and into the second round. Like, I don't even have him as a top 10 receiver in this class. I really don't. And I just look at it. So I think this receiver class is deeper than most people think it is. And I look at what he brings to the table compared to a lot of these big athletic receivers compared to this undersized, more of a slot receiver. And the value of that, unless you're like an Xavier Worthy and absolutely can take the top off of defense. And McConkey's not slow by any means. But I just don't think that value is there. Like people are talking about him as early as first round, second round. Like, dude, I see him as like a fourth round pick, fifth round pick, maybe, he's obviously a little bit undersized. He runs good routes, but I just don't see like, look at Hunter Renfrow, right? Like Hunter Renfrow is like a direct comparison, very similar, right? And he kind of had a good start to his career and he's fallen off. Like the guy, I think had like under 20 catches last year. And it's, what happened, I don't really know, but I see Ladd McConkey as one of those guys that's getting overhyped, where he's getting more attention because he's the white slot receiver, and instead of we're going to hate on him, he's getting like love for that, and he deserves a lot of love. But I just don't think he should go as high as first or second round.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I definitely think he's a solid depth piece, but yeah, I think there's other people with a lot more. I mean, for example, just looking at the draft board right now, guys that Ladd McConkey is currently ranked above in the eyes of PFF. He is ranked above guys like Keon Coleman, like Jalen Polk, like Xavier Legette, like Xavier Worthy. Johnny
like
Wilson.
That's crazy. You know what I mean? That's crazy. There's in no world or any
Brendan Rice, right? I think is another guy, and we're not going to talk about him too much on this, but like he's ranked 95th. Here, I mean, who is the guy that's been taking receptions from Caleb Williams all season? That with a high level, like at a high level.
There's no world where Ladd McConkey's ahead of those guys you just named.
Right.
I'll just be flat out honest. I've watched the film of all those guys. There's just no way. There's just no way.
Yeah,
he wasn't. John, I'll be honest. There's people that have him going ahead of Adonai Mitchell, and when they were on the same goddamn team at Georgia, who was wide receiver 1? Mitchell.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy, It's crazy.
Thank you for the segue because AD Mitchell's on this list as well. Him and Keon Coleman, kind of similar profile receiver, kind of seen as like an X receiver. Different complaints about them, right? Keon Coleman's it's like a hands complaint, and then AD Mitchell, it's like an effort complaint. Personally, I think both of these receivers are first round picks, and I don't think that those concerns are super high. If you want to say those concerns are high with AD Mitchell, then in my head, AD Mitchell's like George Pickens, right? Like great athlete, makes insane plays, but situationally, depending on who his quarterback is, depending how good his team is, you might see him throwing temper tantrums on the sideline, but that doesn't really affect his on-field performance. So
that comparison is spot on, John. That is a spot on comparison for him. The thing is, he's a end of first round, early second round projection. I think that's perfectly fair. And I do think that that's worth noting. There are some character things in terms of not even necessarily selfishness, right? Because we're not in the locker room. We don't really see how he operates, but you can tell the frustration comes out at times, and body language can tell you a lot, right? I mean, look at, what's happening with Stephon Diggs, right? And we'll get to that towards the end of this episode, but he's got body language issues. He pouts and it's not always, I want the ball. It's we're losing and I know I can help us, give me the ball. Right. So it's not always a selfish thing, but you can't go about
and if he's not getting the ball, the effort isn't there. Right. It's the same thing with Pickens.
Right.
Pickens' frame is what? He's 6'3", 6'4", huge frame, has the ability to block the shit out of a guy if he wants to. And if he's running a route where he knows he's not getting the ball, it's like, just like kind of a fat man jog.
And that's a toxic thing to have. Right. So if that does translate and that is what we're saying is real about him, you draft a guy like that and that creeps into the locker room. That creeps into other receivers' minds. That creeps into the quarterback's head, right? And you start to play mind games and the chemistry is not there. It's contagious. That kind of attitude is contagious, but an attitude 180 of that is also contagious. So if you're the guy who doesn't care if you're getting the ball, like you can do that and you can provide that, then that's what you bring to the table. That's what you bring to the receiver room or whatever position you play. But you mentioned Keon Coleman as well, right? So we can hop into him because I think he's even more controversial in terms of a prospect than Adonai Mitchell. And the reason's weird, John, right? He ran a 4.6 40, which for receivers nowadays is considered slow for sure. Again, you know how I am. And if you've been listening to this podcast, the 40-yard dash, overrated as hell, right? It's like, how often do you just run a straight line with nobody in front of you, whether you have the ball or not? It doesn't happen in football. It's like, this isn't track, right? It's not just a race. So Keon Coleman might be a little bit slower in just a deadline sprint, but what he lacks maybe in that is his ability to change direction, his ability to jump and high point the football, and then his ability to use releases and use his frame and strength to get extra open. So he's not going to run by you necessarily, but he's going to get more space to catch the ball because of his abilities athletically and then skill-wise. And the whole hand thing, I think that's blown out of proportion as well. I think he's made some of the best catches we've seen of any of these receivers over the course of his career at Michigan State and at Florida State. For a while, dude, he was a Heisman candidate. Like early in the season, he was an absolute dog. Yeah. And teams started scouting for him, and his production dropped a little bit. But dude, you get him at X with any of these teams that are contenders. If he goes to Detroit, if he goes to Buffalo, right? Like you're getting a star, man. You're getting a guy that you can throw the ball up and he's going to come down with it most of the time.
Yeah, and I agree, Mark. And Mark and I have had this. I think this is the third time we've had this conversation, but it fits with what the theme of the episode is. And Mark, last time we had this conversation, was just like, pull up the film. Let's go look at some of these plays that Keon Coleman has made, and you can go and check out some of those older episodes and see the discussion. It takes you about 5 or 6 plays to be like, okay.
John, it takes one play, bro.
It takes one. It takes the hurdle play.
When he jumps over a dude, where he easily could have just ran him over or made him miss, right, and he chose 5 yards ahead of time. I don't care if he's standing. The dude could have just stood there upright like a statue, and he was still going to clear him. Yeah, he's a special freak athlete. Again, another guy that he could have started at any college basketball program in the country, and at any college football program in the country. There's not many guys that can play both sports and start at Division I level, Power 5 schools, and do both at a high level. Like he was able to do that.
And again, this is not to say there aren't concerns around him. Like there are plays that don't go his way for sure. If you look at any prospect on this board and any prospect we're going to talk about, it's exactly what you're going to see as well. A great one to get into with that is a guy by the name of Nate Wiggins. Now, Wiggins is pretty much considered one of the better man-on-man corners. You can leave him on an island corners in this draft. Now, the problem with that is that he's not great stopping the run, wrapping up and tackling. That seems to be a pretty big knock on him. So you have a guy here that does one thing really, really well and does another thing pretty poorly. Now, depending on the team and what their needs are, that might be okay. I think it just depends on what team's drafting him. Do I see the Lions or the Bears who pride themselves in their ability to stop the run as this is a corner we want to go get? Probably not. In the same breath, though, the Lions have been hemorrhaging, huge plays against number 1 wide receivers. Maybe you need to change up your scheme in order to be like, hey, you're our on an island guy. You're the guy that has to handle, Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, whoever within the division. Yeah. Every snap of the game, and that's your job. Just do that job, and we're not going to ask you to come down and make a crazy amount of tackles. Yeah. I don't know what the right answer is there. Do you have a perspective on that, and maybe a team fit that might be, better as a result of the fact that he struggles at one thing but excels at another?
So I do. In all honesty, John, if your corners are having to make a lot of tackles, your defense sucks. That's the truth of the matter. I mean, there's the only time you really need your corner to make a tackle is if you do a disguised corner blitz. And in those instances, they're blitzing blindly at a quarterback who's standing there. And most of the time when you do that, you're blitzing a quarterback that isn't mobile, right? You're not going to blindly blitz like Lamar Jackson with a corner because he's going to recognize it late and he's going to make you miss and then he's going to throw a touchdown. So when you play a more of a statue kind of quarterback, that's when you'll see that. So in today's modern football, if you can lock and glue onto a guy and take a receiver like Justin Jefferson out of the game, that is a huge, huge benefit to have. And it changes how you can play defense around him. He doesn't have to make a single tackle, but if he makes Justin Jefferson have less than 3 catches and less than 40 yards in the game, you should win the game.
Sure.
Right. So that's the kind of thing that he brings to the table. He's not going to light anybody up and he's not going to come down and tackle, but this isn't youth football and it's not college football anymore. Your job is to be the island that you are. Follow the best receiver on the field, take him out of the game completely, frustrate him, and make sure that no matter what, he doesn't beat you, right? Because when you start having to ask teams to go to option B, option C, option D, that's when you have a chance as a defense. So I think that a team like Detroit, a team like Chicago, like you mentioned, right, that has a good running defense and maybe has some holes in their secondary, you get a guy like this, And now you continue to be good against the run. And now when they have to pass, they can't pass to option one. They got to go to somebody else.
Sure.
Forces you to be deep. And not a lot of teams are deep.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great perspective. And so I've kind of gone both ways on this. Like in my head, like who do I, picture as like a Dan Campbell kind of corner? Like, potentially Cooper DeJean that's really physical, or I don't know, Kool-Aid McKinstry gets mocked to them a lot. I don't see a whole lot of Nate Wiggins getting mocked to Detroit. And again,
they think he's going to be gone before.
Got it. Okay, that's fair enough too.
That's right? What most people. I think he'll be gone before Detroit. I think DeJean or Kool-Aid perhaps gets to Detroit's spot.
I don't think either of them.
If either of those two guys are there, I think that Detroit should strongly consider taking one of those two guys.
Sure.
If Wiggins if he falls that far, absolutely should be considered to be taken by Detroit.
The
there's a lot of teams that need corners.
That's true. But we're talking 5 corners before 29 getting taken for Detroit to not get one of those like more premier first round corners, right? I mean, we have Mitchell, we have Arnold, we have Wiggins, we have McKinstry. Who else am I missing here? I mean, TJ Campbell
in there.
Yeah, and then DeJean, right? I mean, that's a lot of potential first round corners to not make it to the Lions at 29.
Someone good's going to be there. Yeah, someone's going to be there.
One of these guys is going to fall, and Wiggins, as I've seen, has been falling as a result, right? I mean, him and Kool-Aid are kind of battling for that CB4 spot in this draft, just based off of what the draft boards that I've seen have shown. Now, another one where this guy, might be considered the first or second best at his position in certain drafts, but is also marked up as, the fourth or fifth guy, Olu Fashanu. And the main knock against Olu Fashanu is watch the Ohio State game. He cannot block to, for the run game to save his life. And also he has pathetically small hands for somebody his size. Those are kind of the main knocks against him. And I'll just say this outright. I think he is right there, 1A, 1B with Joe Alt. I'm personally a huge fan. I think he's that good. Now, because he held up super well against some premier edge rushers, right? That Ohio State game and the same, knocking him against his ability to stop the run. I saw him get pulled. Took a tackle in motion and were able to make some blocks. He made that happen. And his pass pro was phenomenal. I'm not worried about his hands being small. I'm worried about his measurables with his arm length, his height, his weight all checking out. And trust me, all of those check out. His film checks out. That's the number one most important. Right. And his film check. Well, I'm just addressing the hands issue in specific. And if you everybody is a human and they're going to have bad days, bad games. If you pull up film of any of these guys, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison, you're going to see them have, subpar, below average, not really themselves kind of games. Ohio State run game, Fashanu, sure. If you want to say that wasn't his good game, fine. He was one of the best tackles in all of college football the rest of the year, if we're considering that. So my perspective
right up there.
Yeah, my perspective on him is I think he's the first, probably the second OT off the board, because you have that same risk of, maybe Joe Alt's the generational one. Do you want to be the GM that took the wrong tackle over, Joe Alt? I think you're going to run into a similar predicament there.
I do have Joe Alt significantly ahead of him. But I mean, you make a good argument, and listen, if you think he's closer, that's a fair point to say. And yeah, a lot of the times the media makes it so it's like you look like an idiot if you don't take the projected best option. Sure. And a lot of times the projected best option isn't the best option at more than just quarterback.
What if, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, what if Joe Alt is too tall? The amount of tackles of his size in the NFL that are truly the best tackle or one of the best tackles in the league, a lot of guys, when they're at I think Joe Alt's 6'8". Sometimes they are too straight, they're too rigid. And some of those faster, speedier edge rushers can get away with those certain things. And also, there's struggles against bull rushes at his position. Now, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but what if that's the case? And then, Fashanu is just a couple inches shorter and has all the exact same measurables and very similar film performance. And, it's again, in the draft, all these narratives pop up and you say certain guys are locks or whatever, and certain guys fall for a number of reasons. And then it turns out they're the better ones at the position. We're overthinking it. All right. Taking a look at some of the other ones. Ooh, this is a good one. We haven't talked about running backs. Will Shipley. He's currently ranked
an interesting prospect.
RB 9 or 10. Now, most people aren't thinking about RB 9 or 10 because RB 1 is usually a second or third round pick if you want to be optimistic here. And he has quite a few guys ahead of him. Mark brought this to my attention earlier today, and we were coming up with our list for this. And I went and looked at some film. I looked at his measurables. I looked at his combine numbers, and I'm like, you know what? Will Shipley is a pretty interesting guy. Why is he the 9th or 10th ranked running back in this draft? Mark, what's your argument for Will Shipley maybe being higher on that board?
So a little bit of it is, production and the fall off of Clemson a little, early in his career when Clemson was on a bigger stage, he shined, right? And there was early talks of him being up there, the top 5 of the running backs in his class. And then he kind of fell back a little bit as Clemson fell back a little bit. And, similar to like what happened with Drake Maye, your team around you is not as good. You're not on as big of a stage. You're not playing in big games anymore. And it's going to hurt your stock, right? Same thing can happen to players where you are playing on the big games, right? Like look at Roman Wilson's stock, right? Because Michigan was playing in big games over and over and over again, and he was making plays. And is he as good as people think he is, or was he just being seen more and asked to do more in big moments and rose to the occasion, right? We don't know, right? But Will Shipley is an interesting prospect because he really does everything well. He can pass protect. He's really, really athletic out of the backfield running routes. He can run in between the tackles. He can be a good inside zone, outside zone guy. He can also get downhill and just run power. He can do pretty much everything you need him to do. And when you look at the running back position and what's working in today's NFL, it's the jack of all trades kind of thing. It's the kind of guys that
there's a lot of value to that.
Right. Like Derrick Henry's value and that kind of player has decreased, right? Because he doesn't really do a lot of things. He does one thing really well. It's get the ball, go downhill, and he's hard to tackle. Right. But if you just load the box, you can kind of limit him. Guys like McCaffrey, there's no answer for because McCaffrey's in the slot. McCaffrey's running routes out of the backfield. McCaffrey is motioning. McCaffrey's blocking, right? Like he's doing everything. I think Will Shipley, and yes, they're both white and you can make the comparison, but it's a fair comparison. They both do a little bit of everything. I'm not saying he's anywhere as good as Christian McCaffrey, but their play styles are similar enough where I think it's a fair comparison to say that they play the game similarly and they can do a lot of the same things. And so I think a guy like that's going to be hard to cut. A guy like that's going to be a safe pick late in the draft. And, if Clemson had fallen apart over the course of his career there, we'd be talking about Will Shipley in a much higher note.
Yeah, and I mean, this is also a running back, by the way, that, and measurables aren't everything, but I think it matters because some guys in his position very much shoot up on draft boards because of what their measurables are. I mean, 4'4", 40 guy, 200 pounds, 6 feet tall. Sounds like an NFL-sized running back to me for the most part, right? Like,
and shifty and quick.
And as you're saying, versatile, special teamer, like probably not. I'm seeing PFF has him down at 11, actually. Most of the draft boards I've seen have him at like 9 or 10. Shifting over to another running back that's maybe too highly rated. I don't know. I've seen a lot of tug of war back and forth on this particular prospect, Blake Corum, right? Obviously one of the most successful running backs in college football history, but playing in a power offense with probably, one of the best offensive lines in college football history 2 years in a row. Is Blake Corum an NFL caliber running back? Should he be, the second or third ranked running back on the draft board? I personally, huge Michigan fan, absolutely love Michigan. I can go both ways on this. I don't think like he is some kind of generational running back prospect, though might be consistent, right? With the right offensive line. I see him as like Jamal Williams in my head, right? Like behind the best offensive line in the league, Jamal Williams looked like a stud, but then, okay, how many other running backs can you say the exact same thing about per given draft class, right?
That's why the value of the running back position is dying, right? Because you can take just about any running back that's good enough to stay in the league and survive in the league, and you put them behind the right offensive line with the right running scheme, and they're going to do well enough to win football games. Right. And your Jamal Williams example is a great example of that. And Blake Corum going to the right team is going to be a fine pro. Is he ever going to be a superstar NFL player? I don't think so. Is he ever going to be nearly as good as he was at Michigan? I don't think so. He's not great out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He's willing to block, and that's a great thing he's got going. He's obviously tough as shit. and strong as shit. And so he'll survive. He'll do fine in the league. Like, he'll be around. But I wouldn't draft this guy in the first 3 rounds. No chance. I'm not, and that's a bit of a bias towards the running back position in general.
Right.
He's not a deal
Mark
breaker.
and I have
Like,
had
you look
many debates about Jahmyr Gibbs for those that are new to the show.
Jahmyr Gibbs, like Jahmyr Gibbs is so much more of like an NFL fit because of his versatility and because of his ability to just do so many things. Like Blake Corum, he doesn't like shock you. He doesn't like stand out on film of like, whoa, this guy's going to have, he's going to cause problems for NFL defenses. That's just not the case, man. He's just going to be a good, tough guy that's going to get you hard yards, and he's going to be a good every down back. And I mean, he'll be a good number 2 running back for some team for many years. I don't ever see him being like some star player, right?
Sure.
There's very few times where you get super hype about a running back going in the draft. There was Bijan Robinson, Saquon, right? McCaffrey when he came out, Derrick Henry when he came out, where we're like, this guy's going to change the league. And we were right about all those guys, I just don't see that with Blake. I really don't. I love the guy.
Do you see that from
player.
any of the running backs in this draft? Because tops, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright. I mean, I don't think I think these are second, third round picks. Like,
I don't.
Running back.
I see those. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a running back taken until midway through the second round.
Yeah,
maybe later. I really don't think we're going to see a running back taken. Maybe even the third round. Honest to God, because the receiver class is loaded. You got a quarterback heavy class. And
all these premier positions too. I mean, offensive line. Like, I agree with you. I mean, it's a very different draft class than even last year's, where off the dome we have Gibbs, we have Bijan, we have Tyjae Spears, we have guys that I just think are way better NFL fits than potentially any of their current.
I mean, and there's no secret. Like, Blake Corum chose to stay at Michigan last year. Why? Because he was probably going to make more money as a star player at Michigan than he was gonna as a 3rd or 4th round pick coming out last year. Right. And that's just a matter of the truth there. It is what it is.
All right. I have 2 more for you, and then we can finish this episode out with quarterback talk. I've kind of staved the rest of the quarterback talk off to the back part of this because, one, we already have a quarterback episode. So if you want to hear us talk about all these guys in greater depth, you should go check that out. But also because of the fact that no matter what, quarterback is the position that has the most debate and controversy over. So it's like, okay, we've been hearing this about, these particular guys for months now. So next one, Brian Thomas. I'm seeing him as wide receiver 4. I'm seeing him as a 2nd round draft pick. Where do you stand with him?
I like him at wide receiver 4. He's 6'4", can flat out fly. He's got the length, makes the tough catches, can run the intermediate routes. Like, if this guy didn't have the shadow of Malik Neighbors, right? If he wasn't stuck in that shadow of the best receiver in this draft, without a doubt, and that's ahead of a generational talent like Marvin Harrison Jr., then we'd be talking about Brian Thomas as maybe the 2nd or 3rd best. But because it's just a really good top 3. Odunze is a really good 3rd receiver prospect. I mean, in some drafts, he would have been receiver 1, right? And then you look at Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously. Generational.
It stinks for a lot of these guys, right? Like Jalen Polk and McMillan are both probably going to be, top.
Yeah, because they're in the shadow of Odunze, right? It's just, it is what it is. But I really like Brian Thomas as a prospect. I do have him as my 4th receiver coming off the board. Some team's going to get a steal with him because I do think he'll fall a little bit. Because after Odunze, I do think Odunze, Harrison, and Neighbors all go in the top 10. And if that happens, you're going to see a little bit of a lull. And then Brian Thomas will probably get picked in the 20s, maybe even in the 30s, maybe even later than that. Doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to be drafted higher. It's just a matter of how this looks, and because there is a big drop off from Odunze to him. I'll be honest. In my evaluation, there is, but it's not because Thomas is bad. It's because of how good those top 3 are.
Right. Like, truly, there's no safe pick in the draft, but we're feeling really, really good about those top 3 receivers across the board.
And John, I'll say this too, and this is a hot take, and I posted a TikTok about this. I have Malik Neighbors. For those who haven't checked out our other episodes, go watch our receiver episodes. Definitely worth it. I have Malik Neighbors as receiver 1 in this draft, and I actually have Odunze closer to Harrison as the 2nd spot than I have as Harrison close to Neighbors as the 1st spot. That's how far ahead I have Neighbors ahead of both those guys. And Harris, it's not a knock against Harrison Jr., and it's not a knock against Odunze. It's just Neighbors is special, man. The more I watch, the more impressed I am. He's completely separated himself. He's in a class of his own. And if he had Marvin Harrison's name, we'd be talking about this guy like he's Jerry Rice, like he's the next big thing.
I've definitely played devil's advocate with Mark on this a few times. So if you're surprised at my lack of pushback on the take, it's because we've been here before. And also, Mark is a Division I wide receiver. And I am a guy whose athletic career ended in high school. So, my ability to want to push back on that take versus
Bring
what
it,
you're
John.
actually seeing.
Bring it.
Yeah, I'm gonna plead the fifth here and just move on to the next one, which is kind of allowing me to get on my pedestal. It's a guy that I've actually been pretty high on by the name of T'Vondre Sweat. His draft stock is tanking. It's not for anything he's done on the field or anything film wise though. It's because he got arrested for having a DWI, and I just think we've had enough of this situation over the past 2 years that I'm very frustrated with the fact that this is somebody who's actually been clawing his way up the draft board, and due to things that are completely controllable, completely a set of stupid choices, is now probably dropping himself down quite a bit. And character concerns start, coming into
John,
question.
you know what's going to happen, right?
What's that?
The Eagles are going to take him in the second
Right. So that's what I was going to get to, is there's a guy by the name of Jalen Carter who is significantly more talented at his respective position and a very different player, frankly, than Sweat is. But that's exactly it, Mark, is, Carter, tanked his respective draft stock because of things he was doing in cars that, cost somebody their life. And here we are, and we've had Sweat, we've had Rice, who we'll get into later. I'm just so frustrated with the fact that, like, it is so, especially 2 weeks in, before the draft really kicks off. Like, I am so tired of generational God-gifted athletes doing dumb things in cars to endanger other people and also damage their own careers. It's incredibly frustrating. And yes, I'm going to get on my soapbox and rant about it a little bit, because several people have died in car accidents or have come close to dying in car accidents in the past 2 to 3 years alone, because people think it's okay to either drive recklessly or drive under the influence, or obviously both. Sweat, I'm still very high on Sweat as an athlete, but in my head, right, Detroit Lions are a team I'd love to see take him as a developmental interior guy, and I don't think that's happening anymore, because Detroit Lions and Jalen Carter were mocked to each other quite a lot, and then Jalen Carter fell at 10 picks because of a similar situation. So
at some point you gotta figure it out. Like, it's put in the national light every time this happens, right? And it's a shame that it continues to happen. It's like, learn from the other people's mistakes. Like, how dumb can you be? You're about to make millions of dollars. Your draft stock's rising. You put all the work in. Now you just got to continue to just work out and keep your body right and keep your mind right, and then kind of just float into this draft. And you're about to be a life-changing millionaire if you just don't screw up for a month. And the fact, like, in terms of, like, the timing of how this is, like, if I'm a GM, if I'm an owner, I don't care how good you are, dude. If you screw up in this window, I can never trust you, because it's like, this is the one part of your life where there is no room for error. Lock yourself in your house and do nothing for a month, and you're going to be a millionaire. And yet you can't do that. You know what I mean? So it's like, how is he going to handle success in the league if he couldn't handle the pre-draft success that he had from a college career? I would never draft a guy. I don't care who he is if this was the situation, but a lot of GMs, they sell their soul, and they don't care. If you can help me win football games, I don't care what you've done. I really don't. And it's a shame, but it's a win now league. My job is to win football games, and I'm not going to risk my job because I'm concerned about your character. Like, that's what this league's gotten to.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, people get passes because of their athletic talents. And I like you're saying, Mark, like, to me, there would be so many red flags because of the fact that, it's like, taking a drug test going into a job where it's like, hey, all you need to do is show us your discipline.
Stop for 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. Like,
you couldn't literally just put it down for 2 weeks and just, like, pass the test and then, like, hire and then whatever. Like, that just tells me that there's a lack of self-control and discipline. And that's a major red flag for me when I'm trying to build a team. I'll be honest.
No, I definitely agree. And like you said, though, there's going to be a GM that takes a flyer on him, probably higher than he deserves as a result of that. Now let's talk about quarterbacks. We have, 3 here that we still need to talk about. One, J.J. McCarthy, who's been probably the most controversial quarterback prospect in this draft. If you haven't seen Mark and I's take on this previously, I implore you to go back and watch some of our older episodes. And I'll just keep it simple. His sample size as a starting quarterback in college football, pretty small. He was in a run-heavy offense, and he wasn't asked to do a lot. With that being said, it's hard to discount anybody that is a winner, that throws a great-looking ball when he has the opportunity, can really thread the needle on some shit. Oh, and also, by the way, like, Jim Harbaugh, one of the longest tenured coaches in all of history, is giving him his endorsement. And yes, of course, his quarterback blowing smoke to some degree, I'm sure. I think this dude's an NFL-ready quarterback, and I think in the right system, you continue to not have to ask him to do a lot in order to be successful. And that's important, right? Scheme fit, team fit definitely matters here. This dude is not going to claw your team out of, a 3-4 win season. I'm not confident on his ability to do that. I am confident on him going to a 500 team and maybe making them a playoff team any day of the week. So that's my take on JJ McCarthy. I think that him going up the draft boards is warranted. I don't know if he's going to be the 3rd or 4th overall pick, and I don't know if he's deserving of that. But I do think quarterback desperate teams, that stuff sometimes you're willing to do to just get your guy. Like at Vikings, right? Maybe Broncos. I'm not sure.
When you look at JJ McCarthy, John, and I share the same take as you, I believe in JJ McCarthy. And I think that the early slander he was getting when he first was talking about declaring for the draft, and then right after he declared, people were like mocking him. Like, dude, you're a joke. Like, you're going to be a 2nd round pick. Why wouldn't you stay? And slowly but surely, as the film started to come out and people really started to break it down, and you started to interview him and you started to get a feel for who he is and how his teammates talk about him, how his coaches talk about him, he's a special, special dude. And this is when people argue and they talk about, well, he didn't have to do anything and his film doesn't really stand out and he just hands the ball off. When Michigan needed him most in every big moment, he rose to the occasion. And I'll name a couple examples and I'll rest my case. Ohio State, he was 3-0 as a starter against Ohio State in the game that everybody watches, biggest rivalry in sports, 3-0, did his job, played really well in all 3 of those games. Okay, made some big time throws, ran the ball when he had to. Like, he's not afraid. College football playoff, TCU, he plays okay, makes some mistakes, right? They don't win that game. That's his one loss as a career starter, by the way, at the University of Michigan. College football playoffs this year against a Nick Saban Alabama coach defense. Everybody remembers the Blake Corum winning touchdown, right? And that's what people want to talk about. How'd they get to overtime? Ball on the 1-yard line after a muffed punt that almost was a safety. He drives his team 99 yards, converting several 3rd and 4th down conversions where the ball was in his hands. Not Blake Corum, his hands. When they needed him most, they gave the keys to him. Take us to a championship. And that's exactly what he did. And he delivered that. And then the college championship game, the actual college football playoff championship game, obviously the running game is what they leaned on. That was their game plan. It was working. Why would you do anything differently? But a few times in that game, they asked JJ to step up and make a play. Right when Washington was kind of hanging around, making things interesting, and he delivered on all of those times. So I don't know what else you can ask out of a guy, right, to test him and see if he's built for it. The skill is obviously something you can develop and work with, but what you can't coach all the time is what you have up here mentality-wise. And I think he's one of the special individuals in this draft in terms of what he can do as a leader for you and what he can do for your culture. And that's a quarterback you want, man.
Winning means a lot. It really does. You can say what you want about a lot of these prospects, a lot of these athletes. I think putting the weight and the circumstances on your shoulders, and like you said, being able to rise to the occasion in difficult moments and win difficult football games has a lot of merit to it. That's exactly what you're asking NFL caliber quarterbacks to do. And I mean, you even take middle of the road guys in, the NFL. You're asking them to do some ridiculous shit with a minute and a half left on the clock to win games, basically on a weekly basis. There's not too many 2-score, 3-score wins in the NFL. Every single one is scratching and clawing your way to victory. If JJ's shown that his ability to do that, Drew's getting cheeky in the chat a little bit and saying Anthony Richardson, right? These are the right lack of experience stuff. Anthony Richardson didn't win football games. And if Anthony Richardson
didn't win football games, threw a lot of interceptions.
if Anthony Richardson was a national champion, I think Mark and I would have had very different discussions around whether or not we think he's a bust. But he didn't win a lot of football games. He did throw a lot of interceptions.
I'll just add another stat because it just pisses. JJ McCarthy had the highest completion percentage we've ever seen from a Division I college quarterback, up there with Joe Burrow.
I want to correct what Drew was saying. He was saying that the Colts reached really hard. And the Vikings are
no shit they did. But dude, JJ's he's a special talent. That completion percentage, again, and here's another fact. On plays of 3rd and 7 or more, highest conversion rate we've ever seen from a college football quarterback from a starter.
Clutch.
He was converting by like 70%.
Yep.
Ridiculous to even think about. So when his number is called, when he has to make a play, he does. Moral of the story is that.
And I think last guy we want to mention here, and I think, man, I see this guy mocked at, 11 or 12. I see this guy mocked as very late first round, maybe even high second round pick, Levis situation. Michael Penix. Similar guy, right? Knows how to win football games. Age is a concern. I don't think athleticism is a concern. Yes, there's an injury history.
Although a lot of people say athleticism.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, there's an injury history there for sure. Injury histories do matter in football. I'm not going to deny that for a second. If you come out and say, hey, I actually don't run super often in games, not because I can't, it's because I don't choose to. And then, I forgot what his exact speed was, but it was like a 4.445 speed. Yeah. Seems like his knees are working just fine. And oh, by the way, he is a great passer and knows how to read a defense incredibly well and work that Washington system, which, by the way, is not like a basic system. It was probably one of the more complicated offenses in all of college football last year. Worked that system, no problem. I think Michael Penix is a great athlete, a great quarterback, and does deserve to be higher on the draft board than a lot of people are putting him.
Can I say something, John?
Yeah.
I agree with everything you just said, by the way. This is my true, honest statement. I'm not just saying this to say it. Of all the quarterbacks in this draft, you ask me, who do I think is the safest bet to just be a consistent NFL guy? I'm not saying he's going to be great. I'm not saying he's going to be some superstar player. But if I had to bet on one guy to not fail and not be out of the league in the next 5-6 years, it's him. He is consistent at the things that you need to be consistent at to do well in the NFL. He can make the tough throws on 50-50 neutral balls, because the degree of separation in the NFL, college football, you have this much separation. In the NFL, the average receiver is going to get open by that much.
Yeah, that's why you hear NFL open, right? Like that's
NFL open is like, dude, I'm telling you, that much separation, you're open in the NFL. And Michael Penix is used to that because he had guys like Odunze, right, where they're not necessarily burners, but he put the ball in spots where they can make the play always. You look through and watch all of his throws, tight coverage. He puts the ball right where it needs to be. And all of a sudden you're like, well, that was really good coverage. How do they keep coming down with it? It's because he's so receiver friendly. He puts the ball where you want as a receiver, and he gives you the chance to make the mistake. And if you're a good enough receiver with consistent hands, that's a dream, man. That would be my dream situation. Every time I run a route, I'm not going to get wide open every single time. But if you give me a chance to win at the point of the catch every single time, consistently throughout an entire season. I mean, he did it with Washington. He took Washington in a world of NIL to a national championship game. Could you imagine what we'd be talking about if he had beaten Michigan?
Right. Yeah.
Where are we drafting him now? Right. Like, why are we acting like because he played, not so great against the best college defense we've seen in years?
While likely concussed also, like,
and had rib issues. I mean, Michael Penix is a dog. And I will say the one thing that stood out to me, obviously above his accuracy in tight windows and tight coverage, never phased. Stone cold, never phased in any moment I ever watched him in. Big rivalry games, playoff games, never phased. Always delivered, always cool and collected. And like that to me tells me like there's not a thing I have to worry about with this guy. So you can talk about Williams' talent, Drake May's talent, Jaden's talent, JJ. They all have more talent than Michael Penix. Okay. And I agree with that statement. But in terms of who I think is a safe pick, as a guy that you're not going to miss on, he's the guy. He should be being talked about as a top 3 or 4 quarterback in this draft. And the fact that he's not is honestly a little bit weird to me. I think he'll probably go in the middle of the second round, third round, and that's crazy. Some team's going to get a steal.
Yeah, and people, the argument you just made, which I very much agree with, people are taking that argument and kind of applying it to Bo Nix, right? Like most starts, like most experience. I agree with that, right? The experience part of it does matter. But like, I think that Michael Penix should 100% be if you're looking for a safe, experienced guy to just be a middle of the road quarterback for you for whatever reason it is, why is Penix not the guy in that conversation more often than Nix? Because I just think there's a lot more meat on the bone. I mean, he beat Nix twice in this, and I know obviously it's not a direct comparison, but still, that definitely matters. Oh, and by the way, Penix is working with NFL caliber talent in his receiving core. All three of his guys are NFL caliber guys. I think
and
if
you
Penix
see what he did with that.
I was going to say, if Penix is good enough to, but work with that receiving core to make them what they were, then he's probably good enough to work with NFL receivers and maximize what they bring to the table, what their talents are too, right? So it's a two-way street.
Like I said, dude, he made NFL throws. He made NFL throws. That's what he made his living.
To NFL receivers.
That's why Washington was in the playoff championship game last year, because they made the throws necessary at a very, very freaky high clip. And that translates, dude. That translates to the NFL. And I really do believe he's the safest quarterback pick. And again, if the media wasn't telling you that Jaden and Drake and JJ and all these guys are better than him, and you just watch the film and diagnose it yourself, like, he's right there. He's right there with those guys in terms of what he does and what he puts on tape.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I think that's pretty much the majority of the players in our list here. We came out firing to start. There's a few guys we were fired up about. Again, it is peak lying season. We are 2 weeks away from the draft. And so there's a lot of narratives that are going to get spread around about guys that are just straight up false, don't carry a lot of weight, with the intentions of either rising or tanking their draft stock. And it is effective. And if you don't think it is, again, look at a guy by the name of CJ Stroud, who, you can go both ways between him and Bryce Young, but the Panthers set their franchise back because of the fact that they traded a shitload of draft capital for the wrong guy. And he was perceived as the right guy because apparently he, tested better and, was more cognitively ready to play quarterback or whatever. And those things didn't pan out. So I think this list of guys are the guys that, we might look back on some of these guys and be like, wow, why were we so high on him? Or why weren't we talking about him more? Why wasn't he, higher on the draft boards? So if you liked what we chatted about here, a lot more draft content to go for the next 2 weeks. Definitely make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on socials. You can see them in the banner below if you want to check out our other stuff.